Okay, everybody, this is Kite Runner, Chapter 8, Part 2. So Part 2 is going to begin for me on page 93, where it says I turned 13. So make sure that you're there, and we'll get started. I turned 13 that summer of 1976, Afghanistan's next to last summer of peace and anonymity. Things between Baba and me were already cooling off again. I think what started it was a stupid comment I'd made the day we were planting tulips about getting new servants. I regretted saying it. I really did. But I think even if I hadn't, our happy little interlude would have come to an end. Maybe not quite so soon, but it would have. By the end of the summer, the scraping of spoon and fork against the plate had replaced dinner table chatter, and Baba had resumed retreating to his study after supper and closing the door. I'd gone back to thumbing through Hafez and Khayyam, gnawing my nails down to the cuticles, writing stories. I kept the stories in a stack under my bed, keeping them just in case, though I doubted Baba would ever again ask me to read them to him. Baba's motto about throwing parties was this: invite the whole world, or it's not a party. I remember scanning over the invitation list a week before my birthday party and not recognizing at least 3/4 of the 400+ kakas and khalas who were going to bring me gifts and congratulate me for having lived to 13. Then I realized they weren't really coming for me. It was my birthday, but I knew who the real star of the show was. For days, the house was teeming with Baba's hired help. There was Saludin the butcher, who showed up with a calf and 2 sheep in tow, refusing payment for any of the 3. He slaughtered the animals himself in the yard by a poplar tree. And I want to stop right there because do you guys notice the poplar tree? Remember that we've just gone over symbols, metaphors, and motifs. And remember, tree is a motif that continues coming up. That's a reoccurring symbol. So I just wanted to point to that in case you want to keep track of the trees. Blood is good for the tree, I remember him saying as the grass around the poplar soaked red. Men I didn't know climbed the oak trees with coils of small electric bulbs and meters of extension cords. Others set up dozens of tables in the yard, spread a tablecloth on each. The night before the big party, Baba's friend, Del Mohammed, who owned a kebab house in Surinal, came to the house with his bags of spices. Like the butcher, Del Mohammed, or Dello, as Baba called him, refused payment for his services. He said Baba had done enough for his family already. It was Rahim Khan who whispered to me, as Dello marinated the meat, that Baba had lent Dello the money to open his restaurant. Baba had refused repayment until Dello had shown up one day in our driveway in a Benz and insisted he wouldn't leave until Baba took his money. I guess in most ways, or at least in the ways in which parties are judged, my birthday bash was a huge success. I'd never seen the house so packed. Guests with drinks in hand were chatting in the hallways, smoking on the stairs, leaning against doorways. They sat where they found space, on kitchen counters, in the foyer, even under the stairwell. In the backyard, they mingled under the glow of blue, red, and green lights winking in the trees, their faces illuminated by the light of kerosene torches propped everywhere. Baba had had a stage built on the balcony that overlooked the garden and planted speakers throughout the yard. Ahmad Zaire was playing an accordion and singing on the stage over masses of dancing bodies. I had to greet each of the guests personally. Baba made sure of that. No one was going to gossip the next day about how he'd raised a son with no manners. I kissed hundreds of cheeks, hugged total strangers, thanked them for their gifts. My face ached from the strain of my plastered smile. I was standing with Baba in the yard near the bar when someone said, "Happy birthday, Amir." It was Asaph with his parents. Now remember, Asaph is the boy who attacked Hassan. Asaph's father, Mahmud, was a short, lanky sort with dark skin and a narrow face. His mother, Tanya, was a small, nervous woman who smiled and blinked a lot. Asaph was standing between the two of them now, grinning, looming over both, his arms resting on their shoulders. He led them toward us, like he had brought them here. Like he was the parent and they his children. And I feel like that's a little bit of foreshadowing too, because typically a 13-year-old boy would never lead his parents into a party. And so I get the sense that this is the author's attempt at trying to, again, illuminate Asaph's power. A wave of dizziness rushed through me. Baba thanked them for coming. "I picked out your present myself," Asaph said. Tanya's face twitched and her eyes flicked from Asaph to me. She smiled unconvincingly and blinked. I wondered if Baba had noticed. "Still playing soccer, Asaph Jean?" Baba said. He'd always wanted me to be friends with Asaph. Asaph smiled. It was creepy how genuinely sweet he made it look. "Of course, Kaka John." "Right wing, as I recall?" "Actually, I switched to center forward this year," Asaph said. "You get to score more that way. We're playing the Mekro Rayan team next week. Should be a good match. They have some good players." Baba nodded. "You know, I played center forward too when I was young." "I'll bet you still could if you wanted to," Asaph said. He favored Baba with a good-natured wink. Baba returned the wink. "I see your father has taught you his world-famous flattering ways." He elbowed Asaph's father, almost knocked the little fellow down. Mahmud's laughter was about as convincing as Tanya's smile, and suddenly I wondered if maybe, on some level, their son frightened them. I tried to fake a smile, but all I could manage was a feeble upturning of the corners of my mouth. My stomach was turning at the sight of my father bonding with Asaph. Asaph shifted his eyes to me. "Wally and Kamal are here, too. They wouldn't miss your birthday for anything," he said, laughter lurking just beneath the surface. I nodded silently. "We're thinking about playing a little game of volleyball tomorrow at my house," Asaph said. "Maybe you'll join us. Bring Hassan if you want to." "That sounds fun," Baba said, beaming. "What do you think, Amir?" "I don't really like volleyball," I muttered. I saw the light wink out of Baba's eyes, and uncomfortable silence followed. You guys, I want to stop there too, because in this moment, I feel like this is the first sign we've seen of Amir being brave. I get that it's a little bit weak-hearted, but I think it takes courage to say to Baba, who's beaming, look at the word choice the author uses. Baba said beaming, like Baba's excited for Amir to join this volleyball game. And Amir could easily say, yeah, no problem, but Amir already knows Asaph. And in this one moment, he's like standing up to his dad because he knows that Asaph is bad. And I would mark that if I was you. I think that that's his first moment of courage. "Sorry, Asaph Jean," Baba said, shrugging. That stung, his apologizing for me. "Nay, no harm done," Asaph said. "But you have an open invitation, Amir Jean. Anyway, I heard you like to read, so I brought you a book, one of my favorites." He extended a wrapped birthday gift to me. "Happy birthday." He was dressed in a cotton shirt and blue slacks, a red silk tie, and shiny black loafers. He smelled of cologne, and his blonde hair was neatly combed back. On the surface, he was the embodiment of every parent's dream. A strong, tall, well-dressed, and well-mannered boy with talent and striking looks, not to mention the wit to joke with an adult. But to me, His eyes betrayed him. Ooh, and let's stop again, you guys, because remember those motifs, those reoccurring symbols. Eyes is one of them. So here's another scene where we've got his eyes in the page. When I looked into them, the facade faltered. Hey, you guys, facade, that is one of your vocab words. The facade faltered, revealed a glimpse of the madness hiding behind them. Aren't you going to take it, Amir? Baba was saying. Huh? Your present, he said testily. Asif Jean is giving you a present. Oh, I said. I took the box from Asif and lowered my gaze. I wished I could be alone in my room with my books, away from these people. Well, Baba said. What? Baba spoke in a low voice, the one he took on whenever I embarrassed him in public. Aren't you going to thank Asif Jean? That was very considerate of him. I wished Baba would stop calling him that. How often did he call me Amir Jean? Thanks, I said. Asif's mother looked at me like she wanted to say something, but she didn't, and I realized that neither of Asif's parents had said a word. Before I could embarrass myself and Baba any more, but mostly to get away from Asif and his grin, I stepped away. Thanks for coming, I said. I squirmed my way through the throng of guests and slipped through my wrought iron gates. 2 houses down from our house, there was a large, barren dirt lot. I'd heard Baba tell Rahim Khan that a judge had bought the land and that an architect was working on the design. For now, the lot was bare, save for dirt, stones, and weeds. I tore the wrapping paper off from Asif's present and tilted the book cover to the moonlight. It was a biography of Hitler. I threw it amid a tangle of weeds. All right, let's stop there for just a second. A biography of Hitler. So it's important here that we know who Hitler is. And if you do know who Hitler is, then the obvious thing that comes to mind is the fact that Hitler was a dictator, a dominator, a terrorizer, kind of like Asif. So here's where our first compelling symbol comes in, that a book has been given that has so much to do with the person who's given it. So again, since we've just studied symbol, it would be important for you to find that book and be like, oh, wait a second, Hitler, book, Asif, there's a connection there. I leaned against the neighbor's wall, slid down to the ground. I just sat in the dark for a while, knees drawn up to my chest, looking up at the stars, waiting for the night to be over. Shouldn't you be entertaining your guests? A familiar voice said. Rahim Khan was walking toward me along the wall. They don't need me for that. Baba's there, remember? I said. The ice in Rahim Khan's drink clinked when he sat next to me. I didn't know you drank. Turns out I do, he said, elbowed me playfully, but only on the most important occasions. I smiled. Thanks. He tipped his drink to me and took a sip. He lit a cigarette, one of the unfiltered Pakistani cigarettes he and Baba were always smoking. Did I tell you I was almost married once? Really? I said, smiling a little at the notion of Rahim Khan getting married. I'd always thought of him as Baba's quiet alter ego, my writing mentor, my pal, the one who never forgot to bring me a souvenir, a suhat, when he returned from a trip abroad. But a husband? A father? He nodded. It's true. I was 18. Her name was Humaira. She was a Hazara, the daughter of our neighbor's servants. She was as beautiful as a pari, light brown hair, big hazel eyes. She had this laugh. I can still hear it sometimes. He twirled his glass. We used to meet secretly in my father's apple orchards, always after midnight when everyone had gone to sleep. We'd walk under the trees, and I'd hold her hand. Am I embarrassing you, Amir Jean? A little, I said. It won't kill you, he said, taking another puff. Anyway, we had this fantasy. We'd have a great fancy wedding and invite family and friends from Kabul and Kandahar. I would build us a big house, white with a tiled patio and large windows. We would plant fruit trees in the garden and grow all sorts of flowers, have a lawn for our kids to play on. On Fridays, after namaz at the mosque, everyone would get together at our house for lunch, and we'd eat in the garden under cherry trees, drink fresh water from the well. The tea with candy, then tea with candy as we watched our kids play with their cousins. He took a long gulp of his scotch, coughed. You should have seen the look on my father's face when I told him. My mother actually fainted. My sisters splashed her face with water. They fanned her and looked at me as if I had slit her throat. My brother Jalal actually went to fetch his hunting rifle before my father stopped him. Rahim Khan barked a bitter laughter. It was Humaira and me against the world, and I'll tell you this, Amir Jan. In the end, the world always wins. That's just the way of things. I would write that down. I think that's important. In the end, the world always wins. I think, again, this is a good characterization of Afghanis, that there is something about the public persona, that you have to marry the right person, that you have to do the right things, say the right things. That seems to be a pervasive thought about the Afghanis. And so I think that little piece is important, that Rahim Khan, someone who we know as readers is reliable, that he's saying this to Amir. I think that's important. So what happened? That same day, my father put Humaira and her family on a lorry and sent them off to Hazarajat. I never saw her again. I'm sorry, I said. Probably for the best, though, Rahim Khan said, shrugging. She would have suffered. My family would have never accepted her as an equal. You don't order someone to polish your shoes one day and call them sister the next. He looked at me. You know, you can tell me anything you want, Amir Jan. Any time. I know, I said uncertainly. He looked at me for a long time, like he was waiting, his black, bottomless eyes, there are eyes again, his black, bottomless eyes hinting at the unspoken secret between us. For a moment, I almost did tell him, almost told him everything, but then what would he think of me? He'd hate me, and rightfully. Again, you guys, do you see how that Afghan tradition, or the Afghan way of appearing to others, is creating a barrier for Amir in terms of being who he truly wants to be. He wants to confide in his friend right now. He wants to tell the truth, but he is afraid of what they will think of him. Here, he handed me something. I almost forgot. Happy birthday. It was a brown leather-bound notebook. I traced my fingers along the gold-colored stitching on the borders. I smelled the leather. For your stories, he said. I was going to thank him when something exploded and bursts of fire lit up the sky. Fireworks! We hurried back to the house and found the guests all standing in the yard looking up to the sky. Kids hooted and screamed with each crackle and whoosh. People cheered, burst into applause each time flares sizzled and exploded into bouquets of fire. Every few seconds, the backyard lit up in sudden flashes of red, green, and yellow. In one of those brief bursts of light, I saw something I'll never forget. Hassan serving drinks to Asaf and Wally from a silver platter. The light winked out, a hiss and a crackle, then another flicker of orange light. Asaf grinning, kneading Hassan in the chest with a knuckle. And then, mercifully, darkness. And just so we're clear, as we finish that chapter, light and darkness are also symbols. They're such big symbols that we call those archetypes, and we're going to talk about those later on. But the idea that in the burst of light, and light is considered to be symbolic of knowledge or understanding. So in the light, he sees Asif for who he truly is and sees Hassan and his place in the world. And then the darkness allows him to retreat into not knowing, unknowingness. And so I think the way that that chapter ends is also sort of symbolic. And then mercifully darkness. I think that that might be ushering in a new era in this book of Amir's darkness, his wanting to not know, his wanting to escape. All right, thanks so much. That's chapter 8 in a nutshell.